And I want to start with the most immediate question. What do Democrats do now? I want to go straight to NBC's Mike Memoli. Michael, what do we know?
Well, Stephanie, in terms of that question of what's next, in the very near term, we could see in the next few minutes, in fact, a subpoena being issued by the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler. We heard him on the morning shows saying that could be in a matter of hours. My sources are telling me it could be any minute now. What that subpoena will do will be to ask the Justice Department to turn over to Congress the entire unredacted Mueller report, and not just that report, but all of its underlying documents, evidence, supporting materials. And in fact, we now understand that subpoena has been issued. This is a subpoena that was voted on by the House Judiciary Committee on April 3rd, now being issued by Jerry Nadler himself. What this is now going to do in the longer term is set up a protracted legal battle between the Congress and the Justice Department. We know that in the past, subpoenas have been much more effective as a political tool than as a legal tool. And so what we have in the Justice Department here is an argument that they are being fully compliant, transparent. They have said that they're going to make available to lawmakers, a select group, the Gang of Eight, that full unredacted report at the Justice Department. What Congress is saying is, no, we need to see it all. We've heard from Speaker Nancy Pelosi in the past saying she would not participate in any limited briefing with that. The other thing that's going to happen here, Steph, in the coming weeks when Congress returns here on April 28th is a significant ramping up of hearings in those committees. We have Attorney General Barr expected to come on May 2nd to the House Judiciary Committee. Democrats are very frustrated with that, with him and his handling of this report. That's going to be a major focus going forward.
All right. Well, if they don't pursue impeachment, how do they move forward?
This is the big question, Steph, because the word we often hear from Democrats is accountability. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean an impeachment process? We heard again from Nadler this morning, we're not there yet. We know that that's a politically loaded term. Does that mean perhaps votes to hold the president in censure, a censure of Congress? Obviously, we're also hearing from candidates on the campaign trail, those 2020 Democrats. Does this ultimately boil down to a political argument that the way we need to end this threat to the rule of law, as Democrats consistently refer to this, is by defeating him at the ballot box in November 2020?
All right, Michael, thank you so much. Now, the White House would have you believe that this was a clear-cut exoneration of the president. That's not the case. The Mueller report was exhaustive and detailed, but here's what it wasn't. Clear-cut. I want to bring in three of our very best reporters who've been looking into this. NBC's Justice correspondent Pete Williams, NBC's Julia Ainsley, covering the Department of Justice, and NBC Intelligence and National Security reporter Ken Delaney. And Peter, I go to you first. We had been waiting to find out why exactly Mueller did not reach a conclusion on the obstruction question. And Attorney General Bill Barr said he spoke to Mueller about that. And this is what Barr told us.
We specifically asked him about the OLC opinion and whether or not he was taking the position that he would have found a crime but for the existence of the OLC opinion. And he made it very clear several times that that was not his position. He was not saying that but for the OLC opinion he would have found a crime. He made it clear that he had not made the determination that there was a crime.
Maybe that's why so many people are pushing back against Bill Barr this morning. That's not what the Mueller report shows, is it, Pete?
Well, you know, first of all, we have to say OLC is Office of Legal Counsel. This is a longstanding opinion of the Justice Department under both Republicans and Democrats that for various constitutional reasons, a president cannot be indicted. I always put it simply by saying that you basically can't run the country from jail is the legal theory. So that's the way Barr explained it. I think you're right in the way you set this up, that the report is not really clear about this, for a couple of reasons. On the one hand, it says, yes, a president can be prosecuted for obstruction of justice. It rejects a legal theory of the White House lawyers that because the president's basically in charge of everybody, no matter what he tells them to do, he has the right to do that. They reject that theory. Secondly, they do say several times in the report, the Mueller team, that the evidence on specific obstruction, potentially obstructive actions is ambiguous. It points in both directions. But at the same time, on the very first page of the report, it says we are bound by that Office of Legal Counsel opinion. And so therefore, not only are we not going to charge the president, we don't think we can even say that he should be charged. In other words, they say we're going to walk right up to that door, but we can't go through it.
Okay,
they certainly leave the
Pete, but hold
impression
on
that
then,
the
Pete.
evidence was strong.
Then were we expecting, hoping, believing that the Mueller report was going to be something it never could be? If at the end of the day Robert Mueller couldn't have a conclusion, should we have known that from the start?
Well, I think that's a very good point, and many people said that that was going to be a problem for the Mueller report. They chose an interesting path, which is to say not only can we not charge him with the crime, we can't even say whether one option, I suppose, would have been to say these actions we believe constituted a crime, but we can't charge him. That's not what they did. They said that even that wouldn't be fair because, applying again longstanding Justice Department prosecution policies, they said you can't do that. You can't say somebody is, we think they're guilty, but we're not going to charge them, because if you do that, you deprive that person of the ability to defend themselves, which is what they would normally have in a trial. So,
well, one day ago, the president was saying.
Right.
One day ago, the president was saying that he was exonerated, and now he's back to calling it a crazy Mueller report. Ken, let's
He's
talk
certainly
about.
not exonerated.
Yeah.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.